let's get started. Thanks everybody for coming to today's GoProof webinar, how to easily submit and edit copy on Adobe InDesign documents. It's nice to see some familiar faces. Thanks very much for coming. My name is Emerson and I'm here with Tom. Tom is going to be doing the presentation on the actual software itself shortly. Many of you will know Tom already, probably had a demonstration from him in the past. We're expecting this to last around about sort of 20 minutes or so, plus questions. With your questions, you've got the chat widget on this GoToMeeting. So if there's anything you want to ask, then just fire it in there, and then when we finish with the software, we can jump through the questions and see if we can answer them for you straight away. Anything we can't, we'll obviously deal with after this presentation. So we'll spend the majority of the time looking at the software, but I just wanted to give you a bit of context and a bit of background first on what it is that we're going to be talking about. So specifically, the two products of Adobe InDesign and Adobe InCopy. So we love these products. Don't get us wrong for any minute. We love them. We think they're fantastic. Their relationship is great as it is, but we felt that it just needed a little bit of tweaking, just to sort of modernize it, if you like, just to bring it into the modern era. So when we're out there in the community, we listen to a lot of what people tell us, which is how the software has got to where it is today. So thank you all again for your constant feedback and contributions to that. But some of the things that we were hearing about the InCopy to InDesign sort of relationship, if you like, was sort of outlined here. So a lot of it was perceived within InCopy to be quite expensive, quite complex, seemed to be something that only sort of huge size companies could actually afford and were prepared to roll out. One thing in particular that we were hearing a lot about is the issues with files. The whole sort of file trawling process is very difficult, often resulted in files being emailed around. Those files were sometimes in big cumbersome packages where it's difficult to know which file you're actually opening as the correct one and which one you should leave alone. So there are lots of them were stored locally and links were broken. So all of these things really made it quite difficult for people to justify actually sort of implementing this solution, and therefore it became a bit of a throwaway solution. It's easy to chuck in the towel. And so generated quite a lot of resistance from people who wanted to use it, which is a real shame because they're fantastic products, as we know. So, I mean, the other thing we touched on as well was the version history and how we'd make the versioning work a lot easier. So these were the kinds of things that we sort of distilled down, if we like, that we've got to deal with these. So really, the whole process between InDesign and InCopy was just a bit crufted, just a little bit messy, just needed a bit of tweaking. So we thought to ourselves, right, what are we going to do about this? You know, because they're fantastic products. Let's really sort of make it work. So what we did is we then came up with a solution called GoCopy. Okay, so GoCopy uses GoProof as its engine. It uses the GoProof cloud, or the GoCopy cloud, if you like, but it allows people to get that content, that written copy content from InCopy through to InDesign much easier than they have been able to in the past. So this was a key thing for us, is just to make that whole process super simple and really get the best out of the two products working together. So what we did is we spent some time thinking about the workflows and we reinvented them, and we thought, okay, well, it's pretty good as it is, but it just needs a little bit here and there just to really sort of piece it together. And one of the key elements behind that is having it cloud-based. Currently, it is quite an offline kind of process. So what we've done is we've put it all through our cloud infrastructure and taken away all of those linked file issues and connectivity problems that people had experienced in the past. That was probably the #1 thing that we were getting some sort of feedback on. Obviously, then when you move it into the cloud, it takes away all of the time pressures. So suddenly it's available to everybody. It's always on. It's always accessible. It becomes a lot more team focused, a lot more collaborative, a lot more accessible for everyone. And then you get all the benefits of traceability with the versioning, and we do all the backups as well through our cloud. So that's nothing that you need to worry about at all. And then the key thing as well, we talked about the being enterprise level, being perceived as a high level system. And then when you talk about that, you always think, oh, okay, it's going to cost an absolute fortune. But what we've actually done here is we've brought that down to a price point that is affordable for everybody. Okay, so we've taken it away from just being an elite top level system and made it something that any size creative team, marketing team, business from 1, 2, 3 users upwards can actually use and access this and be able to afford it and realize those return on investment gains that they will get from it. So when we look at the software, we'll obviously sort of focus on these elements. And what I'm going to do now, just to hopefully that's given you some background, some context of what we're doing here, is just simplifying the whole process and making it cloud-based and making it easy to use within your business. So if I'm going to hand over to Tom, Tom's going to show you the software and just touch on a couple of workflow examples to start with before we go into it. So over to you, Tom.
Thanks for the introduction, Emerson. Okay, so first slide I just want to look at before we actually jump into the software. I just want to give you an idea of the 2 different workflows that we'll be showing on today's webinar. The first workflow is the one that we can see on screen here, and this is all about an InDesign user having a layout that's already built and wanting to get some copy editors to come in and add some copy to that layout. And they can do that by using GoCopy to manage the sending of a story from within InDesign out to our external copy editors. And those copy editors can use GoProof to enter their copy into an InCopy article and then push that article stroke story back into InDesign and for InDesign to automatically update. And we're going to use GoCopy to push the flow from the InDesign user out to those copy editors and vice versa. So that's the first workflow that we'll look at, which is kind of InDesign driven. And then the second workflow that we'll look at is when we start the other way around. So this is where we're going to start from within InCopy and we'll write a blank story using a blank template. Once we've written all of our copy into that blank story, we're then going to push that story through to our InDesign user for our InDesign user to then lay that story out into an InDesign document, and then we'll push it back to maybe a copy editor or a sub editor for that user to then go in and make some copy changes to maybe make it fit that new layout style that they've been passed across. And all the way through that process, we're going to use GoCopy in the middle to push the InCopy story from one side to the other. Okay, so let's jump into the software. So just some explanation on what you can see here. On the left-hand side, we have our copy of InDesign. We've got the GoProof panel on screen there, and there's our InDesign document that we're going to use for that first workflow. On the right-hand side, we have a copy of InCopy, and this is signed in as Kelvin. Kelvin's going to be our InCopy user today, and he's going to receive a story shape in a moment from our InDesign user so we can start to go in and put some copy into that story shape. Okay, so if we start over in InDesign, the first thing that we need to do from our InDesign document is to create what we call a story. Now, a story inside GoCopy is a selection of text boxes from an InDesign document. We can do a couple of things with those text boxes. We could say, well, let's create a single story that contains all of the text boxes from an InDesign document. So in that workflow, you're saying, let's give this whole document over to our copy editor and they can start to go in and add some copy into those boxes. Or we can break that down a little bit and say, well, actually, let's break this multi-page document that we have here up into a number of stories. And we are going to just give this single story, which is going to be the intro, over to our InCopy user for our InCopy user to start entering in their copy. And that way, by breaking the document up into multiple stories, we can have multiple InCopy users all making changes to their individual story inside InCopy and then flowing those changes into our InDesign document, allowing for that multi-editing workflow. So to create our story, what we will do is select our 2 text boxes. We'll use the GoProof Stories panel tab here to create a new story, and we're going to call this Intro Workflow 1, just to be sure. Okay, so I can now see I've got my 2 T's inside InDesign. That's showing me inside my GoProof panel now that I have these 2 text boxes added to that intro workflow story there. So what we are going to do now is we're going to send that story shape over to our InCopy user so that our InCopy user can start to drop some copy into those 2 boxes. So to do that, we'll use the send story icon over here in the panel. And this is going to start up the GoCopy wizard, which will just guide us through that process of deciding who we want to send that story through to. Inside GoCopy, we have the idea of using baskets to decide where we're going to route that copy through to. So you can see at the moment, I'm currently looking in the San Fran Studio basket, and inside that basket, I've got 3 different designers. This is effectively the designers basket, and they're all part of that San Fran Studio basket there. And we can go in and jump in and manage those baskets so we can move users around if you want to modify your workflow as you go through. In this workflow, I want to send this through to Kelvin, so I'm going to choose Kelvin's basket. You can see in Kelvin's basket, there's just Kelvin in there. So when we send this story through, this is just going to go into Kelvin's personal basket for him to be able to start to drop some copy in. When we send the story over to Kelvin's basket, there is a preference on those baskets to decide whether we want to notify those users or not. In this instance, we are going to notify Kelvin, so Kelvin would get an email just letting him know that a new story has dropped into his basket. We can customize the message that goes out in that email if you want to. You can drop a message in here. And we can also set a deadline and reminder for that copy. So if you need Kelvin to get that work back to you by a certain date and time, then we can drop that into the deadline and reminder there. The last thing we need to do is just to set the status of the story. So where in the workflow is this story going to be? Well, being as it's right at the start, what we'll do is we'll set that to be ready for our copy editor. Okay, so that's now created our story, it's packaged them up, it's uploaded them into the GoProof cloud, and as far as the InDesign user is concerned, they can now move on to their next piece of work. If we jump over to InCopy, inside InCopy we have a GoProof panel. I'm logged in as Kelvin in this InCopy, and straight away I can see I've received this new story that's just come through from my one of my studio users from within InDesign. And so to start working on that story, it's super simple. All I need to do is click the edit button here, and that will download the InCopy article for me, and then it will open it up inside InCopy. And you can see straight away it's kind of a carbon copy between the left-hand side and the right-hand side. One of the great functions of using InCopy is that any style sheets that have come from the InDesign document are automatically going to be passed across to the InCopy user as well. So if I'm inside InCopy, I'm going to get all the same style sheets that were present on that InDesign document on the left there. When I'm inside InCopy, I can start typing into a box as normal in that layout view there. Or if I want to, we can switch over to what we call the story view, which is kind of like a word processor view of the copy, and then we can start obviously typing into this box. And then lastly, we have what's called a galley view, and a galley view should show me where the line endings are. So you can see, I can see where that line's just dropped down there. If we go back to the galley view, I'm just going to steal some of this copy out of a document I already have. Here we go, so let's grab that. And there we go. And if we just have a quick look at our style sheets here, you can see these are the style sheets that have been pulled in from our InDesign document with the heading and the subhead. If I just want to have a look in my story view, one of the great things about using InCopy is that where we need to do copy fitting, InCopy will actually show us where something does or doesn't fit. So if we just bring this down here, if I just drop a couple of carriage returns in, I can see I've got that copy fit line there. So that's telling me that inside the layout view, this bit of text here won't be seen anymore because it's gone outside of the text box. And that allows me as an InCopy user to see, so I can see in here it's dropped off the bottom. That allows me to see in here exactly how far I'm over by one line. And so obviously we could take those carriage returns out to make that fit again. Okay, so Kelvin's gone in, he's dropped his copy in, and at this point he's kind of ready to send this back over to the studio so that one of the studio designers can pick that copy up and see that copy back in their document. Super simple for Kelvin. All that Kelvin needs to do now is to submit this story back. So we'll click the submit button here. When we submit the story back, we can choose which basket we want to drop it into. So it's currently in my personal basket. Nobody else can see it. If I want to drop it into the San Francisco studio, then I'll choose the San Fran studio basket there. I'm going to update my status to say that it's now ready for design, and then we'll submit that story back. Over on the left hand side, if we jump back into InDesign, one of the things that happens inside InDesign, if as a studio user or as a design user, I've got that document open, I'm going to see that new copy available pop-up come up, which just tells me that Kelvin has just submitted that story back. It's now going to be version 2. It just gives me a bit of detail about when he did that. And now all I need to do inside InDesign is easily just import that copy. And there we can see that's flowed that copy straight back in. Super simple for me to do that amend. If we wanted to now, let's say we want to make a design change. So let's say we want to bring this in slightly. So now that no longer fits. What we can now do is we can send that new story layout back over to Kelvin for Kelvin to make some copy edits to. We could send it out to a sub-editor maybe. So we could put it into a sub-editor's basket. And that sub-editor can then pick it up and make that copy change. In today's workflow, we'll send it back over to Kelvin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go to the GoProof menu. We'll send that story back out. We're going to put it back into Kelvin's basket. We'll say it's now copy editor in progress, and we'll send that updated design. Again, over on the right-hand side now, if we jump back into Kelvin's view, he's got his stories just reappeared. If we edit that story now, it will automatically give Kelvin the updated layout. And straight away we can see we know it's updated because we're getting this over by 4 lines just down here. One of the things I didn't mention on that last round of workflow is that inside GoProof there is file locking going on. So when I'm working on a story inside InCopy, you'll see I get this little padlock icon here. That means that if there were any other users that could see that particular story in a basket, they wouldn't be able to work on that particular story at the moment because I've got it open. So it manages that locking process between different users. Okay, so I'm going to jump into my story view here, and we'll go in and we'll do a modification to make that fit. So I'll just take that bit of copy out. There we go. And then we'll submit that back again, put it back into the San Fran studio. I'll say that it's now ready for design again. So again, that's now been submitted. It's disappeared out of my basket. Over on the left-hand side, again, we get that new imported text dialog come up. So we can now import that copy. And we can now see that that's now fit inside that text box. So that's the end of workflow 1, where we've started with an InDesign, we've created a story shape, we've sent it over to our InCopy user who's then gone in and added the copy, and then we've done some subbing to fit to make it fit the new shape that the InDesign user had changed that layout to. So what we'll do now is we'll switch to our other document. Now that's obviously a blank document, and actually this time we're going to start from within InCopy. So we'll start on the right-hand side, and in this workflow we are going to create a new story from a template. Inside GoCopy there is the ability to create a InCopy template. All you need to do is create an InDesign document with the relevant style sheets and character and paragraph styles. You can then create a template from that document, and that allows an InCopy user to select that template and start to enter copy into it, and they'll get all the same style sheets again. So to do that, inside my GoCopy panel, Kelvin is going to go and have a look at his templates. We've just got a single template in there at the moment called GoProof Marketing, and we're going to create a new story based on that template. So this is where I'm originating content inside InCopy, which I'm then going to send over to my InDesign user on the left-hand side in a moment. So I'm going to call this Intro Workflow 2. I now need to decide which client and project I'm going to drop this in. This is standard GoProof functionality here, so we have the ability to break down all of the content based on a client and a project. So I'm going to drop this into the bridge, and I'm going to drop it into the InCopy webinar project basket. I'm going to write it into my basket for now, because I'm going to start in my personal basket, and we'll create that story. Okay, so that's created a blank InCopy story for me. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to drop some copy into that. So we'll nip over to my InDesign document again. And I'll just paste that text in. So obviously I could just start typing into this text box here on the right hand side. Now, Kelvin is writing this story at the moment in his personal basket, so nobody else can see it. What we're now going to do is we're going to submit this story through to the San Fran studio again, so that one of our creative users can pick that up and drop it onto our blank InDesign document on the left there. So again, we're going to click Submit now. We are going to choose the San Fran Studio basket. I'm now going to set the status to be ready for design, and then we'll submit that copy over. If we jump over to InDesign now, we can see we've got a new story that's dropped into the San Fran Studio. It's currently red, and it's red because it hasn't been placed onto an InDesign document yet. It's just a templated InCopy story with some copy in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to twist this down. I can see I've got some text that I want to place. So I'm going to select my text box inside InDesign. I'll choose the place text option, and that is going to place that story from that we created over in InCopy on the right hand side, and it's going to place it into our document here. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add in this text box at the top. So this text box here is currently not part of the story. So we'll add that into the story. And then maybe we'll send this updated design back out to Kelvin. Again, handles all of the creation of the files and sharing with our external copy editor, Kelvin. Kelvin can then obviously come in and make a copy change, and maybe we want to drop the introduction into here. So let's just go and grab that again. And there we go. We can submit that back again. Again, put it back into that San Fran Studio, update the status, and then submit. And then we can obviously import that last round of changes in. There we go. Okay, Emerson, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. That's great. I'm just going to have a quick look on the questions now, just to see if anything's come through. Thanks very much. Hopefully that's shown you how simple it is just to pass content backwards and forwards. It was quite a cumbersome process, but we've just made it really simple because we know how good it can be. So hopefully now you've really got a taste of how easy it's going to make your processes. So we've got one question coming in. So when the InCopy user is editing text, are they working in the cloud or are they working locally?
Do you want me to answer that one, Emerson?
Yes, you can go that.
Yep. So when they open the story over here inside InCopy, it actually downloads the InCopy story to their local machine, so they can work on it locally. And then when they're finished and they submit it back, it pushes it back up to the cloud. So you can check a story out, close it on your local machine, and come back to it later on. You can open it back up off your local machine and then submit it back into the cloud. So all of that working is done on your local machine.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. Yeah. Okay. So is there any issue to do with fonts?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. We could do some font delivery. There's kind of two things to that. So if the font is an Adobe Typekit font, then that should work as long as they've got access to those fonts in Typekit for that InCopy user. If it's a font that's non-Typekit, so let's say it's one that the creative user has got locally on their machine, we could do a thing where we package it up. We don't at the moment, but we could do a thing that packages it up and pushes it out to the InCopy user. But at the moment, both users would need the same copy of fonts.
Okay, great. So, but we could actually do something that passes them over if that request was in there.
I would think so, yeah.
That's great. Great. Okay. I don't think we have any other questions. So that's brilliant. Hopefully, like I said, that's oh, hang on. There's just one more coming in as well. So, do we have to set up the character and paragraph styles in InDesign for InCopy to work?
No, we don't. So, InCopy will work exactly the same as InDesign. It's effectively almost like a copy of InDesign, but just with all of the layout tools removed. As far as making text changes are concerned, if you've used character and paragraph styles, then brilliant. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. It will still work for that InCopy user on the right-hand side.
Okay, brilliant. Good. Okay. Well, any other questions? Obviously, you can talk to us afterwards. You can support at GoProof.net or support at Opolis.com, whichever you regularly use. If you want to just hop back to the slides, I just wanted to remind you that we have got an ebook that you can look at and download from our website. So if Tom, if you just wanted to show the slideshow quickly, there you go. So you can see when you go to the homepage of our website, you get the hamburger menu, which drops down like you can see on the left-hand side. If you click on free ebooks, We do actually have 6 available now, but one of those is this one. So some of you may have read it already from your emails up to the warming up to this webinar, but feel free to read that. Any other direct questions, please fire them through to us, and we'd love to help. If you want to dive deeper into any area, we can set up a private demonstration for you, no problem at all. But yeah, thanks very much for attending, and we hope to see you again very soon. Any questions, do please ask.